It was a cool evening, with the sun just beginning to dip behind the tall buildings of the city. The streets were busy as usual, filled with the hustle and bustle of people going about their lives. Amidst the noise of honking cars, people chatting, and the clattering of shoes on the pavement, one young girl walking home after school couldn't help but notice something. She passed by the same street corner where a homeless man had sat for weeks, maybe even longer. He was older, with a weathered face, and his clothes were tattered from the wear of time. His eyes, though, weren't empty. They seemed full of something, perhaps hope, perhaps sadness, or maybe something more complex that she couldn't quite put her finger on. She had seen him there before, and each time, she couldn't help but feel a little tug at her heart. People walked past him without sparing a glance, some even crossing the street to avoid the sight of him. It wasn't that they were cruel. It was just that people had grown accustomed to seeing him there, and perhaps they had grown numb to it. But she wasn't like that. She couldn't just ignore him. Her name was Emily, and she was a kind-hearted teenager who often found herself troubled by the world around her. She lived in a busy part of the city, where it seemed like everything moved at lightning speed. The shops, the cars, the people. It was all a blur of activity, and yet sometimes Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had been thinking about the homeless man for days. She didn't know his name or much about his story. All she knew was that every time she walked past him, she felt a pang of guilt in her chest. It wasn't the guilt that came from avoiding him or not knowing what to do. It was the kind of guilt that came from knowing that there was something more she could do but wasn't. That day, however, something inside her shifted. She had just bought a large pizza from her favorite pizzeria after school. She wasn't particularly hungry, but the smell of fresh pizza was something she couldn't resist. As she walked down the street, she found herself slowing down as she approached the corner where the homeless man sat. For a moment, she hesitated. It was such a small thing, just a pizza. She wasn't sure if it would even make a difference. After all, there were so many people like him, people who lived on the streets struggling to survive each day. Could one pizza really change anything? But then, she thought about the times she had felt hungry after a long day, or when she had been too tired to cook for herself. A warm meal, something to fill the emptiness, had always felt like a small comfort. Maybe, just maybe, the man would appreciate the gesture. Without thinking too much about it, Emily turned toward him. Her heart was pounding a little faster now, but it wasn't out of fear. It was out of something else, something that felt like a mix of excitement and uncertainty. She walked closer and with a soft voice said, "Excuse me, would you like some pizza?" The man looked up at her, his tired eyes blinking as if trying to process what she had just said. He had probably heard people say things to him before, some kind words, but mostly dismissive ones, like get a job or go somewhere else. People often treated him like he wasn't even there, like he was invisible. But this was different. A young girl offering him food without asking for anything in return. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. He had been on the streets for so long that any kindness he received felt like a fleeting dream. But this girl, this stranger, was offering him something without any strings attached. "Pizza?" he repeated slowly, as if trying to make sure he hadn't misunderstood. Emily smiled softly and nodded. "Yeah, I've got an extra slice if you're hungry." The man's expression softened, and for the first time in what seemed like a long while, he smiled back at her. It was a weak smile, but it was there. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice hoarse from days of disuse. Emily opened the pizza box, offering him a slice. The man hesitated, not wanting to seem too eager, but after a moment, he took it from her hand. As he took his first bite, his eyes closed for a brief second, savoring the warmth and flavor. He hadn't had a meal like this in what felt like forever. "Thank you," he repeated, his voice full of gratitude. "You have no idea how much this means." Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. She didn't need to say anything more. The small act of kindness had already been shared, and it was enough. As she turned to leave, she glanced back one last time. The man was eating his pizza, sitting there on the corner, but he wasn't just another homeless person anymore. To her, he was a person. Someone who had a story, even if she didn't know what it was. Walking home, Emily thought about the encounter. She didn't expect anything in return. She had simply done what felt right in that moment. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a small, simple act of kindness. And yet, for some reason, it felt like it meant more than she could understand. Maybe it was the way the man's eyes had lit up when she offered him food, or the way his smile had made her feel like she had made a real difference. Little did she know, that simple act would change more than just her day. It would change the lives of people she didn't even know existed. But for now, she was content knowing that she had helped someone in need. As the evening wore on, Emily's thoughts began to fade into the hum of the city. But there was a quiet part of her that couldn't forget about the homeless man. She hoped he would be okay. She hoped that maybe, just maybe, someone would look at him again and see him as more than just another face on the street. And somewhere, deep down, she hoped that one day, the world would be a little kinder, just like that one simple moment. The next day, as Emily was walking to school, she couldn't help but think back to the previous evening. The moment when she offered that pizza to the homeless man still lingered in her mind. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a simple act of kindness, but it felt different from anything else she had done before. It wasn't the first time she had helped someone, but something about this situation felt more meaningful. As she walked down the familiar streets, she noticed a few more homeless people sitting by the side of the road. It was hard not to. They were everywhere, people struggling with life, each with their own story, their own struggles. Some were older, some younger, and some were families with small children. And yet, despite their presence, many people seemed to walk past them without a second thought. Emily felt a pang of guilt in her chest. She couldn't help them all. There were too many people in need, and too many ways the world seemed to be falling apart. But last night, when she had handed the pizza to the man, it had felt right. It had felt like she was doing something that mattered, even if it was just a small thing. That's when Emily realized something important. Kindness didn't have to be about grand gestures. It didn't have to be about changing the world in one go. Sometimes it was the small, quiet moments that made the biggest difference. As she entered the school gates, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out to see a notification. It was from one of her friends. "Hey, did you see the post on social media about the girl giving pizza to the homeless man?" Emily frowned, confused. She didn't remember telling anyone about the pizza. In fact, the only people who knew about it were the homeless man and her. But then it clicked. Someone must have seen her. She quickly opened her social media app and scrolled through her feed. And there it was. A video had been posted of her handing the pizza to the homeless man. The caption read, "Kindness still exists. Girl gives pizza to homeless man in the city." She couldn't believe it. The video, which must have been taken by someone passing by, was already going viral. She quickly checked the comments, and what she saw left her stunned. The post had thousands of likes and comments. People were praising her for her act of kindness, calling her a hero and the kind of person we need in this world. Emily's heart raced. She didn't know what to think. She had just given someone a slice of pizza, and now the entire world seemed to be talking about it. By the time school started, the video had made its way to local news websites. Emily couldn't focus on anything as she sat in class, her mind racing with thoughts of the viral video. She didn't want the attention. She wasn't looking for recognition or praise. She just wanted to help. During lunch, Emily was called into the school office. She had no idea why, but she felt a little nervous. When she walked inside, the school principal was sitting behind her desk smiling at her. "Emily, I have to say we're all very proud of you," the principal said warmly. "Proud of me?" Emily asked, still feeling confused. "Yes, we've seen the video. It's amazing how one simple act of kindness can inspire so many people," the principal said. "You've really made an impact." Emily felt a wave of heat rise to her face. "I didn't do it for attention," she explained quickly. I just gave him a pizza," the principal nodded. "And that's what makes it so powerful. Sometimes the smallest gestures are the ones that make the biggest difference. You've shown the world that kindness doesn't have to be big or flashy. It just has to be real." Emily was silent for a moment, absorbing the principal's words. It felt strange hearing them. She hadn't thought of it as anything big. She hadn't thought of it as anything special. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that maybe the principal was right. Maybe the world needed more of that kind of kindness. As Emily left the office, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from her mother. "I saw the video. I'm so proud of you, sweetie. You've really made a difference." Emily smiled, but there was still a part of her that felt uncomfortable. She didn't want people to think she was looking for praise. She didn't want to be in the spotlight. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the fact that the video had struck a chord with so many people. Later that evening, the local news station reached out to Emily. They wanted to interview her about the pizza she had given to the homeless man. At first, Emily was hesitant. She wasn't sure if she wanted to be on TV. But her mother, who had been talking about how proud she was of her daughter's actions, encouraged her to do it. "You're inspiring people, Emily," her mother said gently. "Sometimes the world needs to hear these stories." "It's important, so," Emily agreed. The next day, a reporter arrived at her home, camera crew in tow. They set up the equipment and the interview began. Emily sat nervously in front of the camera, not sure what to expect. "So, Emily," the reporter began, "can you tell us about that day? What made you decide to give the homeless man your pizza?" Emily paused, thinking about her answer. "I don't know. I just saw him sitting there and I knew I had enough to share. I guess I just thought that maybe it would help, even if just for a little while. It wasn't a big thing, just a slice of pizza." The reporter smiled. "And yet that small act has inspired so many people. It's been shared thousands of times on social media and people are calling you a hero." Emily felt her face flush again. "I'm not a hero," she said quickly. I just did something kind. That's all." The reporter nodded, clearly understanding Emily's humility. "And that's what makes your story so special. It's not about the attention. It's about the kindness. People need to remember that small acts of kindness can have a big impact." The interview continued, but as the camera rolled, Emily began to feel something inside her shift. She had never thought of herself as someone who could inspire others. She had never imagined that one simple act of kindness could reach so many people. But here she was, sitting in front of a camera, talking about the importance of kindness, and realizing that maybe she had just started something much bigger than herself. As the interview wrapped up, Emily felt a strange mix of emotions. She was glad she had shared her story, but she was also grateful that it had been a simple act. The pizza had been nothing more than a small gift, but it had turned into something much more significant. Later that evening, she returned to the street corner where she had met the homeless man. He wasn't there anymore, but she felt a sense of peace knowing that in some small way, she had made a difference. She hadn't solved all the world's problems, but she had given someone a moment of kindness, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days following the news interview were a whirlwind for Emily. The viral video continued to spread across social media, and each time she checked her phone, she saw more and more comments, likes, and shares. The video had reached people beyond her school, beyond her city, and it was spreading across the country. Emily had never imagined that something so small could have such a big impact. At school, she was treated differently. Her classmates, who had always known her as the quiet girl who liked to read and keep to herself, now looked at her with new eyes. They were impressed by her kindness, and some even came up to her to thank her for inspiring them. It felt strange, but in a way it also made her feel good. She hadn't set out to be a role model, but now she couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, that's what she was becoming. One afternoon, as she sat in the cafeteria with her friends, someone came up to her and asked if she had seen the post on social media. Emily nodded, a little embarrassed. "Yeah, I've seen it." The girl who had approached her smiled. "I just wanted to say you're amazing. What you did for that man, it's incredible. You've really inspired me to do better, to help others more." Emily smiled back, grateful but also a little uncomfortable. She didn't want to feel like she was being put on a pedestal. She had just done what felt right, what anyone could have done. But her words had clearly touched people in a way she hadn't expected. Later that day, Emily received another message on her phone. This time it was from a local news station. They wanted to do a follow-up story on her and her act of kindness. They were eager to get her perspective on why she decided to share her pizza with the homeless man, and how it had felt to see the response from so many people. At first, Emily felt hesitant. She didn't want to be in the spotlight any more than she already had been, but her mother, who had been incredibly supportive throughout the whole experience, encouraged her to go for it. "It's not about you, Emily," she said. "It's about the message. It's about showing others that kindness matters." Reluctantly, Emily agreed. The news station sent a reporter to her house that afternoon. This time it was a smaller crew, but the reporter still set up cameras and asked Emily to sit down for the interview. She was nervous, but she tried to remind herself that it was important to share her story. "So, Emily," the reporter began, Can you tell us what it was like to see the overwhelming response to your act of kindness? Emily took a deep breath. Honestly, I'm a little overwhelmed, she said, her voice soft. I never thought it would get so much attention. I mean, I just gave a man a slice of pizza. It was nothing big, but I guess sometimes the smallest things can make the biggest difference. The reporter nodded, clearly understanding. That's exactly what people are saying. You've inspired so many people to do their part in making the world a kinder place. What do you think it is about your story that resonates with so many? Emily thought for a moment. I think it's because it's real, she said finally. It's not a big dramatic gesture. It's just something simple, something anyone can do. And I think people need to be reminded of that. Sometimes we get so caught up in our own lives that we forget how easy it is to make a difference. The reporter smiled and nodded. And how do you feel about all the attention? Emily shrugged a little. It's nice to hear that people are inspired. But honestly, I'm not doing this for the attention. I just want to help in whatever way I can. As the interview ended and the crew packed up their equipment, Emily felt a sense of relief. It was over and she could go back to her normal life. But as much as she wanted to return to the way things were before the video went viral, she couldn't ignore the changes that had come with it. People were looking at her differently now, and she was starting to realize that her actions had the potential to create a ripple effect far beyond what she had imagined. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily couldn't help but think about the homeless man. She still hadn't seen him again. She wondered where he was, if he was okay. Had the pizza helped him? Did it make his day a little bit easier? She hoped so, but she couldn't be sure. What she did know was that for the first time in a long while, she felt like she had done something that mattered. The next morning, she decided to go back to the same street corner. She didn't know why, but she felt like she needed to. Maybe it was to see if the man was there. Maybe it was to see if anything had changed. Whatever the reason, she knew she had to go. When she arrived at the corner, she saw something that made her heart skip a beat. There, sitting on the same bench where she had met him, was the homeless man. But this time, he wasn't alone. A group of people had gathered around him, offering him food, blankets, and even a few dollars. Some of them were talking to him, smiling, and offering him kind words. It was clear that he was no longer just another face in the crowd. People were paying attention to him now, seeing him as a person rather than just someone to ignore. Emily approached him slowly, her heart racing. When he saw her, he smiled warmly. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft but full of gratitude. "You really changed things for me." Emily smiled back, a little surprised by the depth of his words. "I didn't do much," she said quietly. "I just gave you a pizza." The man shook his head. "It wasn't just the pizza," he said. "It was the way you saw me, the way you treated me like I was important. That means more than anything." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. She had never thought about it like that. To her, it had just been a simple act. But to him, it had been a moment of kindness that had changed everything. As Emily walked away from the corner, she felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. The man was being helped. He wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, her small act of kindness had helped to start something much bigger. The next few weeks flew by, and the viral video continued to spread. More and more people were reaching out to Emily, sharing their own stories of kindness and how they were inspired to make a difference. It was a movement that was starting to take shape, and Emily couldn't help but feel proud to be a part of it. But even as the attention continued to pour in, Emily never lost sight of what truly mattered: the simple act of kindness, the way it could touch someone's life in a way that words couldn't fully express. And as long as she could keep spreading that message, she knew she was doing something important. Weeks passed, and Emily's life seemed to shift in ways she never could have imagined. What started as a simple act of kindness had grown into something much bigger, something that had affected not just her life, but the lives of many others. The story of the pizza had touched a nerve in people, and as much as she wanted things to return to normal, she could sense that the world around her was changing. At school, things were different. Her classmates, who had once known her as the quiet girl who kept to herself, now sought her out for advice and encouragement. Some asked her how she had come up with the idea to help the homeless man, while others shared their own stories of small acts of kindness they had done after seeing the video. Emily had become a symbol of kindness in a world that often seemed too harsh. But despite the attention, Emily remained humble. She wasn't comfortable with being in the spotlight, and sometimes she wished things would just go back to the way they had been before the video went viral. She didn't want to be treated like a hero. All she had done was give a slice of pizza to a man who needed it. It wasn't a big deal, but to others it seemed like the world had shifted. One day while walking home from school, Emily decided to take a different route. She had been walking the same streets for weeks, and it felt good to step off the beaten path. As she strolled through a quieter part of town, she found herself thinking about the homeless man again. She hadn't seen him since that day she gave him the pizza, and she wondered where he was and if he was okay. That's when she spotted him. He was sitting on a park bench, looking the same as he had the day she met him. His clothes were still worn and tattered, and his face still carried the marks of time and hardship. But there was something different about him this time. He wasn't alone. Around him, a small group of people had gathered, offering him food, water, and even a blanket. It was clear that the kindness Emily had shown him had inspired others to act as well. When he saw Emily approaching, he stood up, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "You came back," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I wasn't sure if I'd see you again." Emily smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "I've been thinking about you," she said, stepping closer. "I'm glad to see you're not alone anymore." The man nodded. "I'm not," he said softly. "People have been helping me. It's been a real change. I don't think I would have made it through without that little bit of kindness you showed me." Emily's eyes softened as she looked at him. She hadn't realized the full extent of what her small act had done. To her it had just been a moment, but to him it had been the start of a new chapter in his life. "I'm glad," she said quietly. "I never thought it would lead to all this, but I'm happy it did." The man chuckled, shaking his head. "Sometimes all it takes is one person to see you, and then other people start to see you too." The words stuck with Emily long after she left the park that day. It was true, she realized. One small act, one simple gesture of kindness had started a chain reaction. It had opened people's eyes to the needs around them. It had reminded them that despite the busy world they lived in, there were still people out there who needed help. And all it took was someone willing to make the first move. As the days passed, Emily's story continued to spread. More and more people reached out to her, not just to thank her, but to share their own stories of kindness. The movement that had started with a slice of pizza was growing, and Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of responsibility. She had never asked for any of this attention, but now she felt like she had the chance to make an even bigger impact. One afternoon, she received a call from a local charity that supported homeless individuals. They wanted to meet with her to discuss how they could work together to help more people like the man she had met. Emily was shocked. She never imagined that her small act would lead to something like this. When she met with the charity, they told her that they had seen the video and were inspired by the attention it had brought to the issue of homelessness. They asked if she would be willing to help them organize a community event to raise awareness and funds for their cause. They had already started receiving donations from people who had seen her story and wanted to help. Emily was hesitant at first. She didn't want to be the face of something so big. She didn't feel like she deserved the attention, but after thinking it over, she realized that this was a chance to do even more. She had already made a difference with one simple act. Now she had the opportunity to help others do the same. So she agreed. The event was a huge success. People from all over the community showed up, eager to help and donate. The charity set up booths to provide information about homelessness, and Emily spoke about her experience, explaining how even the smallest act of kindness could change someone's life. She talked about the homeless man and how his life had been impacted by just one person's willingness to see him. As Emily spoke, she saw the same spark of hope in the eyes of the people in the crowd that she had seen in the man's eyes when she gave him the pizza. They were inspired. They were ready to act, and that, she realized, was the most important thing of all. The event raised more money than anyone had expected. People offered not just money but also their time, promising to volunteer at shelters or help with fundraising efforts. It was clear that Emily's story had touched something deep within the community. It had reminded people of the importance of kindness and how much of a difference it could make. In the weeks that followed, the charity used the funds to open new shelters, provide food, and offered job training to those who were homeless. The homeless man, who was now known by his first name, had been given a place to stay and was slowly getting back on his feet. Emily visited him regularly, And though his journey was far from over, she could see the change in him. He was no longer just a man on the street. He was someone with hope, with a future. As the months went by, Emily's life returned to some semblance of normalcy, but she knew that she would never forget the lessons she had learned. She had seen firsthand how small acts of kindness could create ripples of change, and she had learned that no one was ever truly invisible. Everyone deserved to be seen, to be acknowledged, and to be helped. She realized that kindness wasn't just about giving something material. It was about seeing people, truly seeing them and offering them the respect and care they deserved. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it, and in the end, that's what mattered most. Months had passed since the day Emily gave a slice of pizza to the homeless man, and life had continued on. But the impact of that small act of kindness hadn't faded. If anything, it had only grown stronger. Emily had been a part of something bigger than herself, and she couldn't help but feel grateful for the unexpected journey she had embarked on. One afternoon, as Emily was walking home from school, she passed by the same park where she had first seen the man sitting on the bench. The park had become a place of reflection for her, a reminder of how one simple action could create ripples that spread far beyond what she could see. She had been back here several times, checking in on him, seeing the changes that had taken place in his life. He had moved into a small apartment with help from the community and the charity. Slowly, he was rebuilding his life, bit by bit. When Emily arrived at the park, she spotted him sitting on a bench near the pond, a book in his hands. His face was still weathered by the years he had spent on the streets, but there was a light in his eyes now that hadn't been there before. It was the same look of gratitude Emily had seen when she first offered him the pizza. But this time there was something more: hope, confidence, and a quiet strength that he had carried with him as he moved forward. He looked up when he saw Emily approaching and smiled. "Hey there," he said, closing his book and setting it beside him on the bench. Emily smiled back, feeling a sense of calm settle in her chest. "Hey," she replied. "How are you doing?" "I'm doing good," he said, his voice steady. "Things are better now. I've got a job, a place to stay, and even a few friends. It's not easy, but I'm not where I was." "I'm really glad to hear that," Emily said softly, sitting down next to him on the bench. She didn't know what else to say. There was so much she wanted to ask him, so much she wanted to understand about his journey, but for now, just being there felt like enough. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the ducks swim lazily in the pond. The world around them seemed to fade away, and for a moment it felt like nothing else mattered except the quiet peace between them. After a while, the man spoke again. "You know, it wasn't just the pizza that made a difference," he said thoughtfully. "It was the way you treated me, like I was a person, not just someone to ignore or look away from. That made all the difference." Emily didn't know what to say. She had never thought of it that way. To her, it had always been about doing the right thing, about offering a simple act of kindness without any expectations. But to him, it had been so much more. She realized then that sometimes kindness wasn't just about giving something material. It was about giving someone the dignity and respect they deserved, seeing them for who they truly were. "I'm just glad I could help," Emily said quietly. "I never imagined it would lead to all of this." The man chuckled. "Well, sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest impact. You've changed more than you know." Emily nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. She didn't know how to respond. She wasn't sure she had fully understood the extent of what had happened since that day, but sitting there with him, seeing the change in his life, she could finally see it. The ripple effect wasn't just about the money raised or the charity event. It was about the human connections, the moments when people truly saw each other and acted with compassion. A few days later, Emily received an unexpected call. It was from a producer at a popular national talk show. They had seen her story and wanted her to appear on their show to talk about her experience and how one small act of kindness had changed her life and the lives of others. Emily was stunned. She never imagined that her simple act of sharing a pizza would lead to something like this. At first, she felt nervous about the idea of being on national television. She wasn't comfortable with all the attention. But then she remembered the man in the park, the people who had been inspired by her story, and the movement that had started because of it. If she could share her story with a wider audience and inspire even more people to act with kindness, then maybe it was worth it. The day of the interview arrived, and Emily found herself sitting on a stage under bright lights facing an audience and the talk show host. Her palms were sweaty and her heart was pounding, but as she looked out at the smiling faces in the crowd, she began to relax. She remembered the message she wanted to share, the message about the power of kindness and how it could transform lives. "So, Emily," the host began, "you've become a symbol of kindness, a reminder to us all that one small gesture can make a world of difference. Can you tell us what inspired you to help that man on the street?" Emily smiled, trying to calm her nerves. "It wasn't about doing something big or heroic," she said. "It was just about doing what felt right in the moment. I saw someone in need and I had something I could give. It was a simple act, but it turned into something so much bigger than I could have imagined." The host nodded, clearly moved by her words. "And since then, your story has inspired so many people. You've sparked a movement of kindness. People are reaching out to help others just like you helped that man. What does that mean to you?" Emily took a deep breath, looking out at the audience. "It means everything to me. I never expected this kind of response, but it's shown me that kindness isn't about how much you give. It's about the intention behind it. When we see someone, really see them, we can make a difference. We can change lives even with the smallest actions." As she spoke, Emily could see the impact her words were having. The audience was listening, and she could feel the energy in the room shifting. It wasn't about her. It was about the message that kindness mattered, that it could change the world one small act at a time. After the interview, Emily felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known before. She wasn't seeking recognition, but she was grateful for the opportunity to share her story. It was a reminder that even the quietest voices could have an impact. Her journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. Over the next few months, Emily continued to stay involved with the charity, volunteering her time and helping to raise awareness about homelessness. The man she had helped continued to thrive, his life slowly rebuilding with the support of the community. Emily's story had inspired so many others to take action, to look beyond their own lives and see the people around them who needed help. She realized that, in the end, it wasn't about one person's story. It was about the collective power of kindness, the way it could spark a movement, change hearts, and build a stronger, more compassionate world. Emily had learned that no act of kindness was too small. Even the smallest gesture could have a ripple effect that spread far beyond what anyone could see. As she sat by the park one day, watching the world go by, Emily knew that her journey was far from over. There would always be more people to help, more moments to make a difference, and as long as she had the power to act with kindness, she knew she would keep making the world a little bit better, one small act at a time.